No sooks, no lefties on a Sunday night. Let us go to Adelaide for both of our guests this evening in beautiful South Australia. Say good day. Kiss the ground for us, none other than Daniel Wild from the IPA and Carlos Quaremba, who is the president of One Nation in South Australia. Carlos, lovely to have you on the show, mate. Welcome aboard.
G'day, mate. How you going?
Good, lovely to have you here. All right, so, Daniel, again, you just saw those opinion polls that we all just went through. One Nation, highest numbers ever, 26%. Redbridge, about as good a poll as you can get. Not as good, of course, as the Sky News Pulse, which you'll get every 2 weeks here on Paul Murray Live and at skynews.com.au. The story remains the same. At what point do you agree with what Samara says, which is not just leading by a little, it's leading by a lot, and I don't think we can call protest anymore. Revolution is on. How permanent do you see the change?
Well, I think it's here to stay, at least for the period of time ahead of us, Paul, to the next federal election. And I think, as we've been talking about over the last few months, every single poll that comes out reinforces the reality that the Liberal Party's experiment with being a centre-left party has failed. And that much has been obvious for a long time, and the rise of One Nation is at least partly attributable to the fact that the Liberal Party has drifted. And the big issues that Australians care about right now, you've got immigration, Australian values and net zero. Those are the three big ones, and it's undeniable that One Nation have, had a strong and consistent view on those issues, whereas the Liberal Party has often wavered. So it's unsurprising that they've gone down in the polls. The other point that I would quickly make is that poll that you reference, that was undertaken in the immediate aftermath of when the Liberal Party voted with the Labor Party to support their so-called anti-hate group laws in Canberra. And I can tell you that a lot of MPs in the Liberal Party were very surprised by the pushback from the community against the Liberal Party voting with Labor on those laws, and they have paid a very steep political price for that.
Well, doesn't that say something about the tune of their ears? Because we could have told them that going in, about what some of the reaction was going to be to all of it. Of course, it was all about trying to avoid a scenario of the Prime Minister being able to point back at the Libs and say, well, you demanded this, but you didn't vote for it. But, of course, the stress test should have been put on all of this, is whether people would have voted for it at all. And obviously, the supporters did not want that to be the case. Carlos, let's talk about this from an organisational level, right? South Australian President, reality is that, yes, polls are good, but a machine needs to come behind it. Obviously, James and others have been doing a lot for a long time, but in a place like South Australia, what do you do to turn polls into votes?
Well, mate, we've got a good team behind us, and we're bringing more and more people on every day. The support is overwhelming, but we're dealing with it at the moment, and we're going to capitalise that on that come election day.
Why do you think One Nation has taken off the way that it has?
Well, I don't think we've taken off. It's not an overnight success. Pauline's been working at this for 30 years, and I think the majority of Australians now are coming to the realisation that One Nation is the only way. They no longer see the Labor or Liberal Party, or the Uni Party as we like to call them, as an alternative, and they're turning to a party that's going to actually represent them and give them the results that they're after and bring back the country to the people.
All right, Daniel, so let's talk about potential leadership here. We all assumed that while last week the two figures of the centre-right and the right were trying to work out which one is it going to be, presumably after the numbers had changed. Since the last time there was leadership post-election, theoretically that centre-right and right number is up, I think, by 1 or 2, but there have been potentially a couple of changes and a couple of waverers. Let's talk about the Andrew Hastie of it all. For some, he's considered a lot more than a silver bullet, but then potentially the entire magazine of possibilities of how to change the game. Yet, as he said on Instagram, honest feedback would clearly mean that 50+1% of people said, not now, mate.
Well, that's right, Paul. I think there's a couple of things here. I mean, firstly, at some point before the next election, you've got to think that a leadership change is inevitable. Just on the polling numbers, you can't go into an election on 20% primary, right? It's going to be a wipeout. So if nothing else, there will probably be a change of leadership, whether it's next week, whether it's in a month or a year, I don't know. But here's the thing, and here's the interesting question to ask yourself. Would changing leader really fundamentally change the position of the Liberal Party at this point?
Nope.
And I'm not sure you could say that it would. I think it would change it by a few points. I think if you had certainly Andrew Hastie, you'd get back the One Nation vote to an extent. But the issue here is so many of the Canberra bubble and so many MPs love talking about leadership. They love the drama. They love the personality. They love talking about the coalition. Will it get back together? Will it not get back together? But this is all ignoring the fact that the Liberal, and your editorial at the start was absolutely bang on, there are fundamental, not just policy issues and values issues, but actual infrastructure, basic campaign infrastructure, candidate recruitment. You mentioned the social media game and lack thereof. These fundamental, at the end of the day, politics is communicating with people. And if you can't communicate directly to people in a convincing way and in a way that they understand across the board, you're always going to struggle come election. I'm not sure changing leader affects those fundamentals. Yes, it may change certain bits and pieces, and yes, it can have an effect, but exactly as you went to, the fundamental infrastructure of the party is at a low ebb in a way that it's never been. So I just think the problems are deeper than changing the person in the hot seat.
Well, and this is my thing, right, which is that I had expected the 12 months post the election to have... Look, again, Bill Shorten didn't become Prime Minister, but I thought he had a reasonable public philosophy, right, which was that it was about party for the first year, policy for the second year, politics for the third year, right? Now, the theory about the machine. Now, one of the things that Simon Crean, way back when, remember, never a chance of being Prime Minister, but his big act as leader was to get the way the Labor Party worked to 50-50. So it wasn't majority union, it was equal say. There are things that to some degree leaders can do, but more importantly, there are the people behind the scenes who seriously need to work out not just why did we drop the ball because we said this and we did the work from home thing, and yes, they called us mean and all the rest of it, but what was the stuff that, candidates like yourself at the election, Daniel, how were they left just swinging in the wind? I mean, Scott Yung was here a couple of nights ago, and we're trying to introduce new faces, right? Because there are plenty of people who want to get involved. It's not just the same old faces. It is new people. It is new blood, people like Daniel who want to get involved. But the reality was he too was sitting in this scenario of, you've got to react to the day's news all the time when you go and knock on someone's door, as opposed to a whole bunch of other things that should be the other arrows in the quiver to be able to shoot that are irrelevant of what the news is. And this brings us, Carlos, to probably the strength of One Nation at the moment, which is that, yes, some issues are running their way, but what it's about, and this is where I don't think that any minor or even major change for the Liberal Party flips these numbers, because for want of a better term, the brand equity that Pauline Hanson has for being the same person for 30 years, whether you like it or not, whether it was popular or not, whether it was elected or not, matters. Throw on top of that the things like the cartoon, the movie, all the rest of it. That consistency can't be invented, can it?
No, it's taken 30 years. Blood, sweat and tears, and the party's not going to change. We've made our principal positions very clear to everybody, and I think what's changing now is the Australian public. They're waking up, they're understanding that things need to change, and One Nation is that vehicle. So while some may think it's a protest vote, I think it's actually the Australian people saying they've had a gutful of what's been dished up by these two parties, and now they're looking for change, and we're going to provide that change.
All right, is everyone sitting down? Because I'm going to slightly surprise some people. I don't hate the idea of the 4-day week, right? Now, currently there are some businesses that put it in place. There are certainly lots of parts of the public service which operate on a 1.5-day week. We know that. And Daniel, in terms of productivity, the reality is more work equals more money. But, of course, under some of these deals, it is less hours work but same amount of money. I also think that one of the reasons why unions are pushing this is because if they can get 3 days that are declared to be the weekend, well, then that's an extra day of penalty rates, which again is all difficult for the employer. But if you're the employee and the majority of the country is an employee, well, same amount of money, less days, and of course with half of that from home, is this the reality of the working future of Australia? And let's not get lost into the work from home scream fest that was lost well before the discussion had even been had.
Yeah, look, it could be, Paul. The point about the unions is a really interesting one. I think you're bang on about the penalty rate side of it. But I also know that unions are sort of a bit vexed on the issue of people working from home or less time on a job site, because when the employees and the staff are on the job site, that's when they can organise. And that's how they rally the staff around and get them to meetings and so forth. So they are actually vexed on this because the unions know that particularly your typical office employee, they'll take a 4-day week, no worries, if they're getting paid the same, obviously, wouldn't we all? And they'll take the work from home if they can. So the unions have to push for it, But behind the scenes, they're going, well, geez, if everyone's sitting in front of their computer at home in their pyjamas and their Ugg boots, how are we going to organise them together on a job site and turn the heat up on the bosses on the job site? So this is actually a really interesting challenge that the unions face. Look, the challenge you've also got here economically with a 4-day work week is if you're getting paid 5 days and working 4 days, you've basically lost 20% productivity right there off the bat. And in the context of declining productivity across the nation, that doesn't look too good. Now, politically for the centre-right, the challenge is the word productivity doesn't sound great because most people think it means doing more with less. And no one wants to have their boss come to them and say, hey, mate, you're going to have to be more productive next week, right? Because everyone knows what that means. So we are in a bit of an economic stalemate. But I reckon look out for how the unions respond to this because, like I say, they have to push for it because their staff want it. But it's not all upside for the unions on this one.
Carlos, I think you're in the construction game, or have been over the years. A 4-day week, wouldn't that be magnificent to make all the projects go that little bit longer, but it all costs exactly the same money?
Well, you know, we're now in a managed decline in this country. Productivity is taking a dive. We can't build enough houses. So a 4-day week in the construction industry, especially in residential, is just an absolute disaster. I think it will lead to a lot of incidences on site and unsafe work practices. I think it's about time every Australian put their shoulder to the grind and actually, you know, turn this country around. And it doesn't surprise me the unions want these sort of things because they don't actually do any work. So, you know, as a small business employer, a 4-day week would kill business. So I won't be supporting anything like this.
Good stuff. What a proposition, right? Get out there, get off your ass, work harder and lift the country. This is part of the sales pitch. I like it. I like it a lot. Now, Carlos, I also want to ask you about South Australia, lead up to an election here. And as always, Labor governments love being able to shove in a whole bunch of taxpayer-funded stuff before officially they start to move towards their caretaker period. All eyes seem to suggest a return to the Malinauskas government, but you're noticing what they're trying to get under the wire before it is election time?
Yep. Look, I think the issue is the people are waking up to the fact that they do nothing for 4 years and they come out with all the candy in the lead up to the election. People are seeing through that. And the question needs to be asked, where's this money coming from and who's going to be picking up the bill? Because, you know, I've got a daughter who's 17 years old. I don't want to leave her with a massive debt, and I don't want to leave my grandchildren with a massive debt. We need to start being fiscally responsible and actually get back to work. And unfortunately, this is what the Labor government do, and all governments really, is they come out with the candy just in the lead up to the election. But I don't think people are falling for it this time.
Well, Daniel, allegedly 17,000 homes, surprise, surprise, not available until 2028. But who cares? Fine print.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is a complete and total cop-out. Number one, the National Housing Accord of the federal government, well, they haven't hit a single target yet. These houses are not going to get built. Number two, they're not talking about the real issue, which is mass migration. No, that is the number one problem, whether you're in Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, any capital city, any major regional centre. It is this massive unplanned mass migration which is driving housing demand. And yes, we have a supply problem. We've got red tape, over-regulation, all of those challenges. But at the end of the day, it's one of the biggest public policy failures we've seen, that the government has knowingly brought in almost 2 million people in their tenure as government, but they haven't had any plan in place for how these houses are going to get built, the most basic and simple of infrastructure that we need. So this is a cop-out. The houses won't get built, and it just doesn't deal with the problem.
Right, unless, of course, the people building them are the same people who built the stadium for the Royal Rumble today, Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. They built a 20,000-seat stadium in, 3 weeks? Oh, I'm sure that's very safe.